Hey all and welcome. Tonight's painting will be done in Artrage Mobile. Usually I paint in Artrage 6, but Artrage Mobile was perfect for today. It's been too long since I've done a video in Artrage Mobile. This continues the series, Paint and Be Safe, Stay at Home and Digital Paint with me and the rest of the world are kind of in a quarantine due to the coronavirus. So nothing better than sitting at home, watching a movie with family, painting on the couch. And I rarely do videos for Artrage Mobile, and I've never done one for the iPad Pro, I think, so I thought this would be great. And what I wanted to do is do 4 paintings in 4 styles using 4 different tools. So this is the pen tool in Artrage Mobile, and I'm just using all of the default settings, and I'm kind of thinking about Calvin and Hobbes with the Naturalistic brush and ink work, and then the watercoloring kind of on top of that. So you've got watercolor and pen and ink, and that's the inspiration for what I'm going to do here. And I hope you enjoy this variety of tools and this variety of approaches. When I'm sitting on the couch and painting, I'm not so worried about doing something serious or, capital A art. I'm just having fun. And it's a wonderful way to pass the time. It's a wonderful way to test out tools and techniques. And that's all this was about. And I think for a lot of us, when we digital paint, there is an interest in doing something really refined and finished, but we have to remember that our sketchbook work is just as important. This video takes a cue from a documentary I saw a long time ago from Walt Disney, and it was 4 painters painting a tree. I think you can see the little clip from it on I think it's the Wall-E making of. It's on like the second disc if you actually have like the at-home edition. But in it you get to see 4 different artists. No, it wasn't Wall-E. I think it was either Wall-E or Sleeping Beauty. I know those are really disparate generations of Disney films, but somewhere in there you can find this 4 artists, 4 trees thing, and amazing artists. And it's really, really wonderful to see the different elements and styles and principles of art that these artists were kind of honing in on as they're working. And so I'm going to do something a lot more lighthearted and a lot more illustrative instead of fine art, but so not a real comparison to that video, but that's where the inspiration comes from. What you can see I've done here is the ink work on one layer and then the watercolor work on a separate layer. And the watercolor brush and the watercolor brush kind of feel is really naturalistic, and it looks like traditional watercolor. So I thought that would be fun for tonight. I think that for my own interests, I almost always want to use the oil brush and the oil brush and palette knife and custom brushes that come right alongside the oil brush. That's my favorite way to use Artrage, but there are a lot of other really useful tools, and so I thought in this video I could do a quick introduction to those. Here I added a new layer, and I set the blend mode on the layer to overlay, and then I'm painting light into the scene by using kind of a warm tone and just painting light right on top of. It's sort of like doing a wet on dry with watercolor, and then I'm doing cooler tones here to kind of richen up the darks, and that's it. It's a pretty simple process and gives a lot of bounce and pop to your colors without having to do any repainting. So that's adding a new layer and adding a blend mode to that layer. In this case, the blend mode is overlay. So that's my quick kind of demo of what you can do with the ink and watercolor. And then what I thought is I would do a painting of some more naturalistic pine trees. And these 2 images, the one that I'm using as a reference, come from Pexels. I think it's like a copyright-free image website, and I use it somewhat often for just random references. A lot of times when I'm doing videos for my YouTube channel, I don't want to be using someone else's artwork, so a copyright-free image is always preferable. In this case, I just wanted to show the kind of versatility of how you could quickly knock in a pine tree And so what I did was start with like a dark local color, not necessarily the shadow value, but close to it, maybe 70% of the shadow value, much more toward the dark end of the value spectrum. And then I put in some warmer and mid-tone highlights, and then the highlights, and then to wrap it up, I'll put in the dark darks. Usually I will work from darkest dark to the lightest light. In this case though, I was just kind of looking for the overall silhouette of the tree using that 70% dark. Um, then I make my brush a lot smaller and put in some of the branches and the trunk there. And then just in honor of my mentor, Ray Vanilla, I put in some purple and some lavender into the tree. He was always famous for having some purple trees in his paintings, and whenever I paint a tree, I like to give a little bit of that, just in remembrance of him. So this is all done on one layer, and you can kind of see how easy that is. And then for this next painting, I'm just going to use the chalk, and it's kind of like a mix of the chalk and crayon tool. You can set it to be either one. And I just lay in firstly a darker silhouette, and then take a little bit smaller version of the tool and put in my highlights using my second reference image here. What's wonderful about painting trees, or painting anything for that matter, is you need a lot less detail than you would think to be effective. And doing little studies like this, if you just break your screen real estate into a quad or into quarters, and then you can just experiment with different ways of laying tools on top of each other or color on top of each other. There's not as much, like we've talked about before, as much intuition with digital as you might have with traditional media. As a little kid, you're drawing with crayons since you're 2 years old. So we can all kind of pick up a crayon and know what's going to happen. But with digital, we need to explore a little more. And at the end of that, a little flourish of using the palette knife with the frost palette knife setting, it kind of turned the entire thing into sort of a speckled surface. And now for the final illustration, I'm just going back to the pencil tool, and I'm using the, I think it's called the hard to dark pencil, and I set the tilt to the maximum tilt, which gives me a broader stroke to work with, so I don't have to do quite as much work to get some value onto the surface. In this case, I'm using that initial reference picture again, and what I love is the comparison between the oil painting, kind of the feel of the oil brush, and here then just the actual just pencil. And sometimes Artrage really surprises me. I really like the way this particular preset for the pencil works, and it was a lot of fun to use. I think I do wish that the pencil could go a little bit bigger, so I could almost like using a graphite stick instead of just a pencil tip kind of turned on its side. But it was really effective and really fun. I've been playing with the pencil tools a lot more in Artrage, and I think that almost more than the pen tool, you can get such a nice mark. So I think the whole point of this video was just to show what 4 different tools could do with 4 different trees and 4 different styles, and hopefully that gives you some inspiration to tinker a little bit. I think we learn the most when we play and kind of don't have a destination. So I think days like this, paintings like this, are really, really good for me in my practice, and they help me have better ideas for when I'm doing kind of the real thing. Here again, I'm using that frost palette knife to blend in the background, and go back in here with the pen tool and just kind of put in some details, trunks, and a little bit more texture. And I guess I thought that it'd be fun to do like a little final pass, like a little flourish here using the pencil tool again, and showing kind of the way that you can intermix and do mixed media digital painting, and that's kind of optimal. It's a good way to work. Here I'm using the Gloop pen, whatever that really is, and in real life I don't know, but it has a neat texture that plays well with the watercolors. So using that to kind of overlay again and give a little bit more value, dimension to the value in the watercolor painting. And then of all things, I'm using the glitter tool just to spray or drizzle some glitter on top of my chalk work in that bottom right hand quadrant. And then here using the airbrush to just mask in some darker values and play with building up value a little bit more quickly than the pencil can. In all cases, I'm just playing around and wanted to share the play, and maybe that might lead to some couch doodling for you as well. So this is watercolor, oil brush, oil pastel, and pencil, all just while watching some kids movie. I can't even remember what we were watching. So if you're interested in this kind of thing, you can check out my Patreon or my Instagram, and here's a screenshot of both of those. And I'm just trying to get back into doing this all more regularly, so I'd love to hear from you and love your support. Thank you so much for checking it out. Take care.